Hello again, everybody. Welcome to yet another edition of Journey Through Sports and Life. Delighted to have you along as we get into the hot days of the summertime. Lots of baseball and, of course, the Dallas Mavericks playing some pretty good basketball now with a chance to maybe win another NBA title, taking on the Boston Celtics. So Dallas Stars lost out and a chance to go to the Stanley Cup Finals. So it's been a great year coming off the Texas Rangers and their first ever World Series win in the 2023 season. So what do you think, girls? We're doing pretty well so far, aren't we? This is great stuff.
Yeah, been
Great
pretty
stuff.
exciting. I don't know about Marnie, Philadelphia and East Coast and North Carolina, but I know I'm having a great time.
I know.
Well, I wish I was there with you guys because it's, definitely lots of winning sports teams. So that's lots of fun.
Well, that's Marjorie and Marnie, and I'm Scott, and also the fourth man of this I was going to call us a trifecta, but we're not a trifecta. We're a grand slam now. There's all four of us. His name is Shane Bevel, and he is a photographer extraordinaire. And we are really excited. When you talk about sports, he's probably covered most of the sports we have talked about over the years. So, Shane, we simply say hello. Welcome to Journey Through Sports and Life. Delighted to have you on board.
All right. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Why don't you tell the audience what you do and how you got involved in this and where it began, where you're from, and where we are today?
Sure. So I worked for my high school newspaper and my high school yearbook. And of course, sports is a big part of that there in Richardson, Texas. Went to Richardson High School and was supposed to go into the technology field and was in a technology magnet school. And right at the end of my senior year, I realized that everybody that had come and talked to my technology class was pretty miserable. They didn't seem to enjoy what they did and their life in general. And I thought, well, I don't want to do that. And my journalism professor, Sarah Scotty, who's taught a lot of people, Mike Mulvey and a bunch of other fairly well-known alumni, I guess. And she said, well, why don't you go to journalism school and be a photojournalist? And I was baffled. I didn't know that was a thing you could do. And quite honestly. And so I went and looked at the journalism school at North Texas up in Denton. And that's where I ended up. And then bounced around, worked for, thanks to Marjorie, worked for the Dallas Morning News when I was a kid. In college, worked on the Metro desk for a while and then transitioned to the photo desk and worked there while I finished up school and was able to shoot some pretty amazing things and work around really, honestly, late 90s sports day folks and Dallas Morning News photography staff. And it really, to me, was kind of the golden era of that newspaper and that environment. And I learned so much from all those folks and I'm still friends with a lot of them. And then I went to Roanoke, Virginia, and then I came back to Texas and worked in Marshall, Texas. And then I worked in Shreveport for quite a while and covered Shreveport sports and the SEC. And every once in a while, the Saints were terrible then. So every once in a while, when the Saints would write enough bad letters to the Shreveport paper, we'd go down and cover a game, so they'd leave us alone. And
Power of the letters.
Right. Well, Shreveport's an interesting town because you have, your equidistance basically from Dallas and New Orleans. And the culture really matches East Texas better than it does South Louisiana in a lot of ways. And so there are some diehard Saints fans there, but there are a lot of Cowboys fans there too, or were. So I was there for a while, and then I moved to Tulsa to work for the Tulsa World, and I worked there for a while. And then in 2009, when everybody seemingly got laid off, I got laid off. And my wife and I had decided that we just really liked the city of Tulsa, and she had a job she liked. We bought a house. So we stayed here, and I went freelance. Now I do a pretty good mix of editorial work and commercial work, and still do a fair amount of sports work, and have over the years. So it's kind of a mix now.
Yeah. Well, I
know the girls probably have all kinds of questions to ask you, but I want to ask you one more, and I'll step aside for a few minutes.
Okay.
All the things that you've gotten a chance to do, and I mean, it's pretty impressive just to listen to the short just short bio that you just shared with us, Shane, but I just wondered, is there one thing that stands out above all others? People have asked me over the years, who's the most incredible person you ever interviewed in your life, or that you ever met, or how about you, that you ever took a picture of and had a chance to meet, or an event, a person, or whatever it is that's going to be a part of your legacy for the rest of your life?
Yeah, there's so much. I mean, I spent an entire game day with Eddie Robinson. In his retirement when his health was starting to fade, and then I covered his funeral, and all kinds of different things. But probably the most impactful early on, and you guys will have to help me on dates. I know you have them all memorized. I don't. But the Stanley Cup finals that the Stars won, I was able to run film, is what we called it, and I would literally run from the office down under the bridge and across and up to Reunion Arena, which is no longer there.
Right.
And I would run through the whole building and get rolls of film from all of these amazing photographers, We Win and Eric Schlegel and Michael Mulvey and Louis DeLuca, and just, absolute stars of the sports world. And then I would run back, and the trade-off was you got to shoot the first period because you would take your gear over, shoot, and then you ran film during the second period. And then if you got your job done quick enough, then you could go back and shoot the end of the game and then run film again. So it was all about how fast you could get back and get through the crowds with all your equipment to get in place. And so,
and did you run film the game that went to like 3 a.m?
So that game, you guys are going to catch me lying, but that game was out of town. It was not in Dallas, right?
Oh, okay. So you didn't.
That is correct.
because it double complicated it, because it was some stupid time in the morning on our end. No, I worked that night on the desk in the color lab with William Schneider, who was the editor at the time, the night editor. And I'll be honest, we did a lot of cussing. There was a lot of cussing.
1999 was the year.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Year.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, 25 years ago, and I thought they might make it this year, but unfortunately they lost to Edmonton.
Yeah.
Right.
So that probably is. For me, I've covered a lot of things since then. I've been to Final Four a couple times, and I've covered. I cover NCAA championships, but for me, like, that's always going to be one of my fondest memories, even though it was a long time ago, just because of the people I was around and what it taught me. I learned untold wisdom out of that experience. And there's a lot of things like that. I give you another example. Like when it was one of Michael Jordan's last years, when it was one of his retirements. Well, I don't know how many times he retired, but it was one of them. And he came through Dallas, and it was supposed to be his last game ever to play in Dallas. And I was running film for the paper, and John Davidson, the visuals editor at the time, tasked Eric Schlegel with making the picture of Michael Jordan. The picture. Make the picture. That's your only job.
Wow.
Make the picture. So Schlegel goes over there and he sets up over the hoop in the catwalks. And I went to him to get his film, and he hands me one roll of film. One roll, 36 exposures, and that's it. And I'm like, Schlegel, where's the rest of your film? He's like, that's it. You shot one roll.
The picture is in this one roll.
The scariest man I ever worked for sent you over here to make one picture of Michael Jordan, and you shot one roll. And he goes, no, I only shot about 18 frames. And I got back and I stick it in the processor, and sure enough, the roll is half empty. And if you search right now on Google, Eric Schlegel, Michael Jordan, you will find the image. It is him straight above, going at the rim. It's an amazing photograph to me, and I'll never forget him handing me one roll of film and just being blown away. I would have shot a truckload of film if they would have given it to me. I would have been so scared.
Oh, I would have imagined.
That was 2003. Was Michael's last year. So it's 21 years ago.
No, this would have been before then, and it could have been that they thought he was going to retire. I don't remember what the story was, but that was the deal, was he was go make one picture of Michael.
Wow.
Go for it, Marjorie.
So Shane, you said you were a kid when you went to the morning news, but you were young, but you were so talented already. And so I'm sure that they treated you very well because they probably respected the work. Well, of course, they treat you like, newspaper and you're the young kid and all that. But I would imagine they really respected your work, especially the fact that you said you're still in touch with so many of them now. It wasn't like you were getting any kind of special break. You deserved that position.
Well, let's be clear about what respect looks like in that situation. And I was a kid. I was
Yeah, you were probably what?
I was 20 years maybe? Old when I started working there on the Metro desk with Leona Allen, who's still there and is, amazing, and Martha Flores and a bunch of really cool people. And but the respect came in that they let me work. They allowed me to come into that environment and to work for them in really crux positions in important, running film and shooting some in Stanley Cup finals and in, on Sundays at the Cowboys and the first race ever at the NASCAR track out there. And, so many things that they, there weren't a ton of us that were allowed to come and work. And so that's really where the respect was. Did they respect, the photographs I made? I don't know. I mean, William Schneider had 5 Pulitzers to his name at the time. I don't, he won a Pulitzer for covering the Olympics, for God's sakes. How do you do that? I don't think the Pulitzer committee has handed out a photograph for sports photography before or since. And so, is around a bunch of really amazing people. Yeah.
So before Marnie jumps in here, also, I think people probably don't understand what it means to be a photographer, and in the scope of sports photography, it's like, oh wow, you're lucky. You get a camera and you go to stand on the sidelines and you get a few shots and then they're published. And what a great life. What does it take to get that shot? You just talked a little bit about, the catwalk and the camera up there and, all these kinds of things. But what is it about sports photography that people would be shocked to find out what it takes to get that shot? And what is it like, maybe, let's say, covering a Cowboys game?
So I haven't covered the Cowboys or the NFL in a very long time, so that's probably not the best example. But I will say this, and I'm about to make 99% of your audience very mad. The dirty little secret is that I am not a sports fan. I don't watch sports. I don't keep track of sports. I don't play sports. But I am a huge fan of storytelling of all different kinds.
Yeah. And you're an outdoors guy. That counts.
I'm an outdoors guy. Yeah. I hunt and fish and spend time outdoors and do all those things. But as far as like I was talking to a buddy of mine today, you guys are going to be amazed. I thought about it after you called me the other day, after you texted me for a while. I, honest to God, cannot tell you right now who the head coach or the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys are. I don't know. I have no idea because I haven't covered them, and I don't read about them, and it's the same thing. And I'm a bad sports fan when I am a sports fan. When North Texas wins a little bit, I'll go to some games. When they don't win a little bit, I don't go to some games.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of a unique thing for me. So for me, it really is work. It's not. There are a lot of, and I'm not unique in that. There's a lot of photographers that do want to be there on the sidelines. They love the excitement. They are big fans. Most of them are still real, true professionals. You're not going to find them cheering on the sideline. You're not, none of that. They're not going to be wearing team colors, photographing the team unless they're working for the team. And so, but, knowing the story going into it, knowing how it operates, and then finding the story as it evolves within the game or the event is what I really love. And then some sports, I really love the technical aspect. So, you mentioned the W earlier, and I when the now Dallas Wings, when the Tulsa Shock was here for 5 years, I was the NBA photographer for them. So I covered every game, I covered every event, every home game, every event. And I really loved it for a lot of reasons. It was super technical. We hung cameras all over the arena. We shot on lights, which is kind of we lit the arena with strobes, which is kind of a lost art. People don't do that as much anymore.
Wow.
And NBA still, they don't require it, but they like it. They like you to light. And, we would run anywhere from, 3 to 8 or 9 or 10 remote cameras in all kinds of different places. And so making
And how many
that all work-
photographers? It was just you?
Yeah.
And you're running that many cameras all over the place?
Yeah, they're set up on a system where you basically have a near court system and a far court system. And so when action happens on the near court, you fire the near court remotes. And when action happens on the far court, you fire the far court remotes, is how I would set it up. Everybody sets it up different. And so it was me, and I usually had an assistant to help haul gear. And because it was, 300 pounds of gear that we would haul in and out every day. And I mean, it's exhausting. It's depending on the sport, it's exhausting. It's mentally exhausting. I mean, one of the worst days in sports photography that I've had in a long time was really not all that long ago. I'm not going to guess on how many years ago, but 6 years ago, 7 years ago, pre-COVID time warp, I covered the NCAA Women's Volleyball National Championship at Oklahoma City. And I hadn't shot volleyball since college. I'm pretty seasoned. I can walk in and kind of figure anything out. This is the most humbling day I've ever had behind a camera. I couldn't make a picture to save my life. The action was faster than anything I have photographed in a long time. The strategy was maddening to try to figure out, which just goes to show how good those women are at what they do and the sport that they play. And I came back day 2 and, redeemed myself, as we say. But the first day it was rough. And I left and went home and I was mentally drained because I had spent however long, I don't even know how long a match lasts, but however long that match lasts, I spent that entire match just mentally beating myself up and trying to figure out what was happening in front of me. And I'll tell you, I wasn't shooting for somebody's mom or for a team that wasn't going to, I was shooting for the NCAA. The NCAA was my client. So it was an important shoot.
Yeah.
They needed the pictures they needed. So it's exhausting. It's mentally exhausting, physically exhausting. There's a lot of pre and post work for a WNBA game, a big game for the W for a 7:00 tip. We would be at the arena at 1 in the afternoon. And then we would
that's what I'm talking about, where people probably don't realize what goes in. You don't just get a camera, stand on the sideline, shoot for a while, and then go home,
Yeah. And you can do it that way, but you can't do it that way and make the images that a lot of us that put the time in and the effort in make consistently.
Right.
Everybody makes some really nice pictures now and then. It's sports is a target-rich environment. But if you want to do that consistently and you want to be known to be able to do that consistently, it does take a lot of work. Yeah.
So Shane, definitely, obviously, the physical part of being a photographer. I worked at NFL Films. Like I saw those guys. They were like, carrying around tons of equipment and film and everything else. And now, when you stop shooting on film, or do you still use film, or is everything digital now? Did that change for you? And do you know, like when you actually get the picture, are you confident? You're like, I just got the picture. Like, like instinctively, do you know when you get the shot?
Yeah. I think you do at a certain point. Yeah. I'm of a generation, I suppose, where I started shooting film professionally at the Dallas Morning News. And that's largely because the Dallas Morning News was late to transition away from film. They had so many photographers at the time that the idea of buying each of them $32,000 worth of digital cameras was not, they could buy a lot of film and chemical for that same amount of money. And so I got to shoot all these big events on film, and I got to understand how that worked. And I trained and learned, not that I haven't learned since then, because I learn every day, but I trained and learned shooting film. And when you're shooting blind like that, you do build up a different understanding of what's happening in the viewfinder. And now I shoot all digital. You know that you push the button at the right time. More and more, the autofocus has just become amazing. And so we worry less about that. But I mean, that was always when we shot film, that was always a terrible thing, because you might know that you made the moment, but then you were rushing back to ask the lab tech, or if you were the lab tech, you were looking at your own film and just praying to God it was sharp, that it was in focus. So yeah, sometimes and sometimes you don't. And then sometimes you go back and see stuff and you know that you didn't see before in edits. Sometimes you're using remote cameras and you have no idea. Did it fire? Did it not fire? Did it fire at the right time? And you may not have access to that remote camera until after the game. So you just have to take that and put it out of your head, because if you sit there and think about whether or not you made that picture of that slam dunk or that home run or whatever through the remote camera, then you're not paying attention to what's happening in front of you.
So do you have sorry. Go ahead, Marnie.
All right. So can you give total amateurs a few tips to make a photograph better? Like, what do we do I know that obviously different genres, but like if you were at a sporting event or if you're photographing your kids or something like that, like, are there some generic tips that even somebody who's a terrible photographer could actually make a picture look decent?
I would tell people to really look for, like I said, I'm really a storyteller. And so the photos that I love the most tell stories, whether single frames or over multiple frames. And so I would tell people to look for the stories. Aside from that, I mean, there's a old war photographer that, is famous for saying, if your pictures aren't good enough, you're not close enough. Access is huge and becomes more important all the time, with so many more outlets and restrictions and on who can be on the sidelines and who can't. The other thing I would say is if you go about it the way that I go about it, choose a sport and a team or a person that you don't care about. So if your kid plays football, that's great. You're going to go shoot pictures of them. But if you want to get better at shooting football, go and shoot a team that you don't know, because then you're paying attention. That I think that's an advantage of the fact that I am not a sports fan. I am only concerned about what's going to happen in that game for the reason of telling the story of that game and for the reason of making those images, versus having any kind of interest in who wins or who loses or any of that. Now, that's not to say that I don't get attached to a particular story. I covered women's college World Series for a decade, 12 years. I'm not there today, obviously. But over those 3 days, I could find myself really getting attached to one team or another, or one woman or another who I liked their story, who I followed their story a little bit coming into. It's not like I don't do research. I do. But it's not my pastime.
Well, even though those of us like Scott, Marnie, and I are all sports fans, but we learn when we're covering teams or some of that, we don't become fans of the teams. We have to separate ourselves. But I want to build on something Scott asked you. Scott asked you earlier about, somebody you might have shot that you really, it was a meaningful. What about an image? Do you have a favorite image sports image that might come to mind when you think of something that really captured the story in the moment?
I think every time I shoot a championship, an NCAA championship, the payoff of all those long days is really in the end when you get to be there and experience this person or this team accomplishing something that they probably never thought they were going to accomplish, that they may never accomplish again. And then that's amplified in the sports that I really like to shoot, which is in the last probably decade, maybe 15 years. I have not covered the NFL as much or at all. I've not covered NBA. I've not covered a lot of those. What I've really enjoyed is I covered the cross country national championship a few years ago when it was in Oklahoma State, and it was amazing. The stories were amazing. The effort that the kids put in, the athletes put in, was amazing. There's no that's it for them, right? So that moment of that championship, of crossing that line, or in golf of winning a team golf championship, those moments are always the most memorable. I looked earlier. I have in my archive, just in the last 15 years or so, I have a 500,000 images. So
Wow.
For me to pull one image, it would, based on the image itself or the moment itself, would be really hard, and honestly would probably be disingenuous. There's stories, there's images that I'll never forget seeing and making because of the stories that were around them or that kind of thing. But I think my favorite image in general is that storytelling image at the end. And it's not always the one that wins, right? There's everybody has something different they say about them. I call them crying baby pictures. I love making crying baby pictures because it's an amazing moment in that kid's life that they will never forget, whether it's something that they want to forget or they don't want to forget. My guess is 10 years down the road, they're going to look at that and they're like, man, I was the runner-up. I was the one that lost to the championship. Nobody else got there, and I think those are amazing moments. And then really like telling stories. So I got to tell a story one time of 3 teams in Louisiana, Sarepta, I almost said plain dealing, but that's not right. Sarepta, Spring Hill, and Cotton Valley. And they were all little bitty 3A teams. They had fought school consolidation for a decade, even though they were a decade past needing to consolidate. None of their kids qualified for the state scholarship because none of them had a foreign language instructor. They had to go and take online, well, not online back in the day, but they had to go and take classes somewhere else. So they really needed to consolidate. None of them wanted to give up their teams. And finally, slowly, they came around to this idea of giving up part of their school. And like the elementary school was in one, the middle school was in one town, and the high school was in one town. I kind of joined these 3 teams together through merging their sports and their schools. But in the process of that, Cotton Valley quit playing high school football when there's a team in Shreveport called Evangel, which sure you're all familiar with.
Oh yeah, of course.
And this was during what was the famous family? Was it Booty, John David Booty, and those guys? The quarterback family. They were in like 3 brothers that were all quarterbacks through that.
And that's cool. Their winning record. They were.
And I think 2 of them went to go play in the NFL. And they at the time were a 3A team, and I can't remember the exact deal, but the state came in and basically said, okay, you can no longer play up. If you are a 3A team, you are going to play 3A ball.
Oh, not to embarrass the bigger.
And well, I don't know. They did it for a lot of reasons. It's, get into a whole conversation about private schools playing public ball, but that's a whole nother podcast. And so, but the end result was this little bitty team in Cotton Valley that was a true 3A team was in the same division as Evangel and played them every year. And Evangel's offensive and defensive lines at the time averaged over 310 in 3A.
Wow.
And this team and a ton of other teams just forfeited the games. They wouldn't go play because they're like, our line averages 190. We're going to get kids hurt stepping onto the field. And so I got to cover kind of the end of Cotton Valley football when they stopped playing football. And it was emotional and hurtful for that community, and delved into kind of the politics of high school sports, and was a really great story. I loved working on it. And so I've worked on tons of little stories like that I just think are fantastic beyond the actual action of Friday night.
Jane, let me ask you this. You talked earlier about access, and I just wondered, when you're talking about being out there and shooting a Cowboys game versus a Mavericks game versus the Stars, whatever, I would think from a standpoint of access, what you can focus on, whether it's on one player or just the crowd or whatever, it would be so much easier to do someone like, the Stars or the Mavericks that are in a confined arena rather than a football field that's 1,000, it's 100 yards, but seems like 1,000 yards.
It seems like seems like 1,000 when you're trying to cover it with 40 pounds
exactly.
a year.
That's my point. And same thing with the baseball, unless you're, right there in the dugout or stuff. You don't get the, I just listening to you, the fact that you're not a sports fan, I would think as a award-winning photographer, you're going to be more interested in the emotion of what's going on, of what people got involved in from the time they put the uniform on, went out and did their thing, and then took a shower at the end of the game. You want the emotion, you want the tears, so I just wondered, I would think that you'd be more focused on not a baseball game or a football game, Cowboys, Rangers, whatever, but maybe the Olympics or something like that. So you're right there. You get the emotion of a track and field stuff. Yes?
The Olympics is something I haven't shot. I call and offer my services every year to Andy Scott, and he hires Eric Schlegel instead, which is what I would do. I would not hire me if Eric Schlegel was available, but all old Dallas alumni. And so, I love covering Olympic sports in general, but I love them for a reason that you might not think of, right? So in the NBA, and again, I'm still on contract with the NBA. I don't shoot for them a whole lot, but occasionally I go down to Oklahoma City. I have access. And when I'm shooting for the NCAA, I have access. But sports has changed so radically over the last 25 years that your average newspaper photographer gets shut out of a lot of access, even if that game is in their hometown, even if they are the hometown photographer for that team, because there are so many more media outlets. There's so many more restrictions on where you can be and where you can't be. And so, yes, I'll take your point and agree with it. I will modify it in that I covered the Final Four twice in the last few years. I covered it in Indiana during the COVID bubble thing, and then I covered it in Minneapolis the year after. And the whole time, the guy who hired me to shoot with his team, Jamie Schaumburg, who's an amazing guy and an amazing sports photographer, all I really wanted to do was get on a plane and go to the women's Final Four. Because I like women's sports better for a lot of reasons. I think there's a lot of times more emotion to it. I think there's more. I think there's more strategy to it. I can watch as a non-sports fan, but somebody that understands sports. I can watch a WNBA game and watch women set up plays and run the strategies and watch it work. And I tell people all the time that when I first started covering WNBA, it reminded me a lot of covering the NHL. And people were like, "You're crazy." And I'm like, "No, I'm not." The guy comes in, he's got the puck, they call a play, they set it up, they run the strategy. It's the same thing, right? We're working cooperatively as a team. And I think those are amazing stories. You get better access. The emotions a lot of times are way more real. Like you are going to get a much better reaction out of a kid that wins, I think, that wins the American Conference tennis finals than somebody that wins, a football title in the SEC and then knows that there's more steps to go, knows that there's more to their career, knows that there's more down the road, as
That's
opposed
an excellent
to,
point.
And look, I don't know if that's
why I
true
brought up
or
the
not,
Olympics.
but
That way, but that is.
Yeah.
that's the way I think of it. And I'll tell you, it shows in my photography. So like you guys were saying, you were looking at my website. There's a super old picture of ORU playing Arkansas in baseball. And Arkansas came to ORU, this little bitty school. At the time, I was working for ORU sports department a lot, shooting a lot of sports for them. And ORU just handed it to them. And the emotion in that picture and the response in that picture, just amazing. And I see that more in, we can break it down in the nomenclature of today, right? Revenue sports versus non-revenue sports. And I see that more in non-revenue sports, and I see it more in women's sports, and I love it. And quite honestly, selfishly, they're just thankful you're there. You want to hang a remote on the backboard? Nobody's ever done that at our game because we're a women's team. Great, let's bring the backboard down. That it's easier to do your job. And then the stories to me are more fulfilling.
Well,
but I'm not interested in being on the front page all the time anymore, because unfortunately, that's not where those stories always land.
Yeah.
And, but I'm interested in making the story for me. It's just my drive to make the photos that tell the story.
I had never really thought about that in terms of photography.
Let me jump in here for just a sec. We've only got 3 minutes left.
Okay.
So keep your answers short if you can. Marjorie, go for it.
I'm sorry. I'm not good at that.
All I was going to say is that I was covering the Super Bowl one year and somebody asked me if you were, this is like the pinnacle. And I said, well, actually, I would rather be covering D3 football. Yeah. And they thought I was hilarious, but I was thinking of what you're saying, the emotion, this is the end of the line, that kind of thing. And I had never thought of it in photography. Had you, Scott? I mean, you worked with cameras a lot, photographers when you were in television.
Well,
did you ever think about it that way?
Yeah, exactly why I asked that question. Because to me, emotionally, impactfully, just as me from my heart and here, covering the Olympics over the Cowboys, the Super Bowls, that's great. To be at a Super Bowl, I've been to 40 Super Bowls. It's awesome. But my point is, the heart, I remember being at Miracle on Ice, and they made the movie, 1980 Olympics. The hockey team beat the Russians. One of the greatest sporting events I was ever at. And it was because of the emotion of what it represented, one country over another, and these college kids. End of conversation. So wrap it up. Whoever's got a final question.
Yeah, go ahead. Who's up?
Oh,
Marnie?
Well, I've always got a million questions, and I think you guys are always trying to keep me to a minimum. So Marnie, go ahead and take the last question.
All right. So with all that being said, is there something on your bucket list of photography? So you've done all these things, but is there something that would be just wow?
Yeah, it runs the gamut, and I clearly, I think you've all diagnosed me that I clearly have ADD, and so it depends on what mood I'm in and who I'm talking to at the moment. But I haven't shot the Olympics. I would love to go shoot the Olympics someday. I just think the stories that are there are amazing. My heroes covered the Olympics, the people that I looked up to. I had all the Olympic photo books when I was a kid and poured through them. I think that would be really great. But I also think it would be amazing to be able to go back to where I came from in West Texas and cover, a tiny, cover the Paducah Dragons in West Texas, where my family is kind of all from, and be able to dig in and just focus on that story for an entire season. How amazing would that be to know all of these kids and to see their story from beginning to end? And unfortunately, it just, time doesn't work that way so often. But I have friends, my friend Jeremy Inlow, who's there in Fort Worth, gets to cover a lot of Friday night football and has done some amazing projects. And that's the kind of football that I'd like to go.
Well,
if you told me I could either go to Paducah for a season or go to the Super Bowl, I would go to Paducah.
I totally get that.
It would not be 30 seconds.
Would you ever want to publish it in a book's photo story of 1 year in Paducah?
Yeah, I think it'd be fantastic.
I think that would be amazing.
Yeah, there's 300 people in Paducah, so we would probably sell about 200 copies.
Oh, I don't think so. I don't think so. I remember John Feinstein telling me when he wrote Season on the Brink that it was only going to sell to Indiana basketball junkies. And of course, we know what happened with that.
Right,
so
right.
I think you would be onto something there.
Shane Bevel, thank you. Not 200, 203. All three of us will buy one too.
Good.
Yeah,
Good.
We can't thank you enough. You're a rock star. You're a superstar. And forget the fact that you haven't been in the Olympics. You've done everything else. So congratulations and all you continue to do. We look forward to the book. On behalf of Marjorie and Marnie, I'm Scott. Thanks to Shane Bevel. Till next time on Journey Through Sports and Life, stay safe and be well.